and welcome to 3Q, where I interview industry professionals for just 15 minutes by asking three powerful questions. I'm your host, Rachel Vogel, and joining me this episode is Joe Barham, founder and CEO of HIFI Labs. HIFI Labs is a creative incubator and artist mentorship collective that builds an artist-owned, community-powered future for musicians. Fueled by Web3 technology and industry-changing innovation, their mission is to achieve a more equitable and sustainable music economy. Before launching the company, Joe was the head of music for Patreon, the largest direct-to-fan artist membership platform in the world. And prior to Patreon, he founded the creative agency Tandem, working with clients like Google, Com, and Twitter. Over the course of his career, he's also become an award-winning producer, director, and content creator, working with the likes of Jim James, Washed Out, and Metallica. His work has been featured in Rolling Stone, Pitchfork, Billboard, Forbes, The Wall Street Journal, and plenty of other well-known media outlets. So with all that said, Joe, you sure have accomplished a lot. How's it going?
It's so good, Rachel. Thanks for having me. I love your show and really excited to be here.
Let's get down to business. Question one. Imagine for a second you're sitting down with your 25-year-old self. What one piece of advice would you give him on a personal note? And what one piece of advice would you give him from a business perspective?
Yeah, it's such a fantastic question. So on the personal side, I think I would tell my 25-year-old self to leave the job I was at. And with that, the I think core lesson would be take more risks. I was actually in terrestrial radio at the time. I had been there probably 3 years, and probably 3 months in, certainly 2 years in, I instinctively sort of felt that it wasn't the right place. It wasn't what I thought it would be. And so within that, like taking more risks, I think it's so valuable to try to figure out how you can identify when you've plateaued, and really trust your instincts when you feel you may be plateaued and you're not learning as much as you could be. And it's obviously easier said than done, and not everyone can always have the opportunity to try too many different things. But I even went personally from a place of almost having no money and was learning so much more. And I think in hindsight, I grew much more personally and professionally in that time. So yeah, I know it's been said many times before, but I think just taking more risks in your 20s, it's the best time to do it. It's the best time to try as many things as you can to go wide before you're going to go deep in your career and get your 10,000 hours or whatever you want to call it.
So your companies are just so unique. What was the driving factor behind each of them, and especially HiFi Labs? How'd you think of that?
Yeah, well, I guess at that point, there's a through line to that lesson that I think I sort of figured it out 5 years after that. And at that point, I sort of, in my own career, bounced around from as many perspectives of the music industry as I could get in for a short amount of time. And I wasn't trying to do that, but I was being pretty critical of how long I wanted to stay to kind of learn and grow. And through that approach, I think it led to HiFi Labs being an opportunity at a solution to fix more parts of an industry that I thought wasn't optimized. And I think the music industry gets a lot of grief for being totally broken, and I think that's a true statement. But at the same time, there's amazing people from every part of the industry working really hard to fix it. It's like a really complicated problem to fix. So I think HiFi Labs always came from trying to look at the problem from a bunch of different perspectives and put together sort of a thesis that is probably very imperfect, but an attempt to be idealistic about how we can improve upon it.
All right, moving along. Question two. Every industry has its dirty little secrets, and we all know that it's no different in the music industry. Sometimes people think that's a bad thing, but that's not always the case. Sometimes they can be good. What's one secret you would like to share with our listeners about the industry?
This is both scary but positive, I believe, where it's so competitive. And there's something about music, and I think this is a beautiful thing where almost anyone, especially now with access to technology, can feel like they're a music superstar. And I think that's fantastic. But if you compare it to something like sports, when you look at, like, I could be a LeBron James versus there's something that feels more accessible by music. And again, I think that's a positive, but objectively, like, the numbers of success versus how many people do it are like flabbergasting. It's so difficult even to get to a sustainable level, not just be a superstar. On the positive side of that, because that's obviously like almost very dark, But on the
Mm-hmm.
positive side of that, in my experience, in what I've seen across the industry with a lot of artists worked with or friends who have worked with artists, it's every single day they can, take those learnings, I guess, from the aforementioned take risks and take learnings. They obviously increase their odds so significantly to success. And so I think that's the biggest secret, is that it is incredibly hard to make it and break through. But if you are committed to it, if it is the thing that instinctively, you want more than anything else and you love, you should absolutely still do it, because the longer you try, and the more ways in which you can approach it and learn from mistakes and find strengths and find mentors. I think mentorship is like a huge part of the music industry and success and network. You're going to increase your chances 10, 100x, 1000x even.
Mm-hmm.
But that's one thing that I think myself and a lot of the artists I worked with, you feel if you do these 5 things like that other artist did these 5 things, you're gonna have a really good chance of making it. And it's definitely not that simple.
I think you bring up a really good point. And even from like the business side, executives and artists can both apply to this. Sometimes if you hear a no, that is almost the best thing that can happen to you. And that's going to be like what's going to turn your career around.
It's so true. There's using sort of fear to your advantage. And I think that can be in exactly like hearing negative feedback or just feedback in general can be really hard to take in a creative career. And it can create fear around, am I doing the right thing and should I do this? That's like the age-old belief or statement that if you fear something, you should do it. I think that's oftentimes, not all the time, obviously. You don't want to walk into traffic on that sort of thing, but the fear of success and creative success, that can usually be a really good arbiter for something you should push for, because it probably means like it's something that you see value and you're just second guessing it.
100%. Question 3. Throughout your career, I can only imagine you've been asked plenty of questions, whether for an industry conference, the media, or maybe even a promotion. But throughout all of those interviews and all of those questions, there has to be one question that you've never been asked but would have liked to. So, what is that question and what would be your answer?
That's such a good question. I was going back and forth, and I feel that I've been asked a lot, like how your career started and why you enjoy it, or different parts, but I've never really been asked like, why did you choose to work in music? Why did you choose to stay in music? And for sure, obvious answer is, love the art form, love music. But I think it goes back to sort of the first answer too, where I think there's just such a massive opportunity for growth and the importance of music and a musician to the world, in that, they're A, probably partially born with a really valuable gift, and B, they've had to fight through that second point to just like stay alive long enough to share their music and hopefully sustain. I really deeply believe there are a lot of ways, via different labels, different management approaches, different technology approaches, that can get the sharing of art, and certainly in the music industry, to a place where more fans find more music that they love, and then more artists can sustain. So being in a difficult industry, I question that sometimes with myself. And so I was interested. I was like, I don't think I've ever been asked, like, why do you do this? And I think for anyone in the music industry right now, and for any artist, though it is competitive, I don't know if there's a better time, if you can view it as like an opportunity to be a part of something new and really find a way to build your own career in your own way. It's a really unique moment in time right now, whether you're a professional or a musician in the industry.
So before we go, I have to know, how'd you get into producing music? And is that something that's still a huge part of your life?
Yeah, my mom gave me her first thing she bought as a kid was the old Yamaha guitar. And so I got that when I went to college and started playing with my buddy Mickey. And it was always a bit of more of a side thing, but I feel it was really helpful. And my career earlier on was radio and then management, and being able to produce was fascinating, because 2 quick points. I remember watching the Rolling Stones Jean-Luc Godard documentary, and they're in the studio, and you have Mick Jagger and Keith Richards playing like a horrible version of Sympathy for the Devil. And at one point, Mick starts playing on some drums, like some bongos, and it changes the complexity within like 2 seconds and turns it into this iconic, timeless song. And I just was so fascinated by the preciousness of, those little moments of like, does this work or does this not work? And I wasn't incredibly technically savvy, and I'm by no means a known producer at all. So I'm not like Rick Rubin over here, but I just think that's such an interesting part of it. You don't have to have, like the understanding of trim and balancing and every little detail of waveform, as long as you can kind of trust your instincts. And so producing music videos, just the idea of being able to be creative and collaboration, I think alongside trying to solve some problems in the industry, is the most fulfilling thing, is just sort of producing something that didn't exist 5 minutes prior to 5 minutes later once you've created it.
Well, now the people will know, so you're going to get hit up, asked to be their producer.
We'll put out the beacon.
Yeah. Well, Joe, it has been such a pleasure having you on tonight. Thank you so much for taking the time.
Thank you for having me, Rachel. Keep on doing these amazing interviews. You get some of the greatest guests. I hope to fill in massive shoes here.
I appreciate it. And to everyone listening, I hope you enjoyed tonight's episode. Stay tuned for next week of 3Q, where I interview industry professionals for just 15 minutes by asking 3 powerful questions. See you next time.